Peter Hartcher is the political editor of the Sydney Morning Herald. He joins us now. Good morning, Peter. Let's talk national security, one of the government's strong suits, so we're led to believe. Yet this whole issue of stripping citizenship from terrorists, it continues to boil away.
It's riven the government. It continues to divide the government. We saw last night Malcolm Turnbull refusing publicly to endorse the policy, suggesting that this is still being litigated or relitigated within the Abbott cabinet. We hear now that the Solicitor General's advice has not been provided to the cabinet, and this is advice which, according to leaks, according to the ABC, says that the proposal may be unconstitutional. So we now appear to have a very disjointed, chaotic and divided policy-making process on this it's a very important question about Australians' rights at issue here. And the government certainly doesn't seem to be able to get itself organised.
Well, there are two series of rights here, I guess. There's the rights of Australian citizens, but there's also the rights of cabinet ministers, if I can put it like that. You go in a cabinet, you argue all this through, but the starting point is that you've all got this access to the same information. If, as these leaks suggest, that's not the case, how damaging is that for the process of government?
Well, remember that the February spill against Abbott was all the essence of it, fueled by poor polling, but the essence of the discontent was all about the frustration and anger of members, mainly backbenchers, but also ministers, frustrated at centralisation, micromanagement and over-control from the Prime Minister's office. Lack of consultation, lack of good process. And so now what do we see? We see, even within the cabinet, this sort of division, information given to some, not to others. We see reminders, courtesy of the ABC killing season programs, of what happened to the Labor government when you had an over-centralisation, you had difficult management of the cabinet, difficult relations between cabinet ministers. It brought down, it contributed to the downfall of one Prime Minister. Has the Liberal Party learned nothing from Labor's disastrous time? This is really basic stuff that they are just getting wrong.
Okay, now that's internal, but what's happening now with Malcolm Turnbull? We know from the stories that you published, from leaks that you got from in Cabinet, that he spoke against some of these measures or raised concerns within Cabinet, but that's not going public, that's just government working properly. Now he's hardened his position publicly. What's happening there?
Yes, well, my understanding was that at that initial Cabinet meeting when this idea was presented, that this is the idea of stripping Australian citizenship from people who have dual citizenship if the Immigration Minister suspects that they're guilty of terrorism-related offences. That was not controversial. What seems to happen is that it's retrospectively become controversial within the Cabinet. That's what we can conclude from what Malcolm Turnbull has said or refused to say in refusing to endorse the policy. So there seems now to be this question is being re-argued or revisited or relitigated within the Cabinet. So it continues to divide the government by all appearances.
Now, still on national security, still supposedly the government's strong suit. And if they've had one political win, the biggest of all would probably be stopping the boats. But now they're in trouble there with these allegations of paying people smugglers. They've tried to put a lid on it. It's an on-water matter, or it's intelligence, or it's ACES. The Indonesians don't see it that way. They seem to be happily fueling it.
Yes, the Indonesians don't see the sanctity of anything that happens on the water as somehow being not subject for public discussion. There are two problems here, I'd suggest, Chris. One is that you can't simply use the rubric of on-water matters or national security to allow law to be broken. Potentially, I mean, the accusation that is out there is that Australian agencies, perhaps ACES, perhaps another agency, has broken the law by paying people smugglers, which is illegal under Australian law. There may be questions about territoriality, exactly where the boats were, when the payments were made. Our correspondent in Indonesia, Jewel Topsfield, has Indonesian police sources telling her that it did occur near Australian territory and probably within Australian waters. So the allegation and the suspicion here is that an Australian government agency is breaking the law. Now the government has to deal with this, has to answer it, explain it, fix it, whatever needs to be done. They can't simply wish it away. Just because you're an intelligence agency doesn't mean you can break Australian law. The unpleasant truth about intelligence agencies worldwide is countries have foreign intelligence agencies. The Americans have got the CIA, we've got ASIS, to break the laws of other countries. This is what they do. This is why they're covert. This is why their operations are usually deniable. And this is why they usually operate at arm's length. Because they do break the laws of other countries. They spy on other countries, they steal their secrets. That's one thing. It's illegal, and it's unpleasant, but it's not breaking Australian law. The intelligence agencies are not supposed to and not allowed to break Australian law. And this is the suspicion. And that's the first glaring problem with this. The government, simply by keeping its mouth shut, does not dispel that central problem and that central question in this case. Second problem, as you say, is that the relations with Indonesia, which Abbott has consistently said is Australia's most important single relationship, continue to deteriorate. Initially it was the boats, then it was Australian spying on the then Indonesian President Yudhoyono, then it was the executions of Chan and Sukumaran. Now it's again back to the question of boats. At each point, relations deteriorate further. There is less and less goodwill and less political capital in the relationship. Now, if Abbott is serious that it is the most important bilateral relationship Australia has, then he's got to change the way he deals with it. My own suggestion is that when it's an intelligence-related matter, he's twice now refused to take it offline. He's happy to have it in the public domain and just leaves it there to fester. My view is that a Prime Minister, the wise thing to do is to immediately take it offline, to say to the public, to go to the Parliament and say, serious questions, serious issues, I'm going to investigate and talk to the Indonesians about it. Take it off the table, take it offline, go away, and then fix it on the government's terms and timing. Abbott seems incapable of dealing cleanly and intelligently with these questions.
Well, perhaps I have the view, as long as people are talking about the boats, they're on a winner, and you mentioned that ASIS operates in a covert manner. Well, they didn't. If it indeed was ASIS, there was nothing covert about it. Not only did they hand over cash, they did it in the view of asylum seekers. So the calculation must have been that, as Angus Taylor just said, all that people care about is whether the boats stop or not how it's done. What do you think of that kind of political assessment? Does it pass the pub test?
No, it doesn't. I think the public may not care about this particular detail, but the public has only just found out. The whole country's only just found out. The public already has some reservations about the way this has been done. Of course, it's a national achievement. Australia is in a much better position than it was under Labor to take refugees through the resettlement program rather than ad hoc through boats. Australia does not want the situation with the Rohingya refugees coming out of Myanmar pouring across into Indonesia and Malaysia. Australia does not want the problem of masses of Libyan and North African refugees pouring across into Europe. It's chaotic, it's life-threatening. This government has done the right thing by stopping that flow, no question. And Labor should embrace most of the policies that have achieved that. But the ends do not justify the means if we have our own government breaking our own laws. A government cannot break its laws, even if it's an intelligence agency. What's illegal is illegal. This government is out there celebrating the Magna Carta this week. The concept that nobody, the government included, is not above the law, and yet it's prepared to allow this to go unanswered. It's just wrong, and there's no other way of saying it.
Before I let you go, let's return to a domestic matter. We spent a lot of time in this place of media looking at what's happening in the Senate because almost always the government doesn't control the Senate. We've seen a kind of a big shift in how the upper house works, with the Greens playing themselves back into the game and supporting government changes to the aged pension. What do you make of this?
Well, this is a remarkable state of affairs where the government, Scott Morrison in particular, has put up a pension reform which, as Morrison told me on the record, he said, I think a reforming Labor government, a Hawke-Keating style government, would be proud of this kind of measure, and I think he's right.
And it's supported by welfare groups like ACOS.
It's supported by ACOS, which is now a very responsible, centrist, thoughtful policy advocacy outfit. And yet the Labor Party has opposed it. The Labor Party has opposed what is essentially a remodelling of the pensions to protect the worst off and to cut benefits to people who own their own homes, have more than $1 million in assets, and take the pension. Now, that's an indefensible position for Labor to take. But so Labor has also been irresponsible because it was a saving of $2.4 billion a year to the budget. Labor's been irresponsible, unprincipled, and now exposed as impotent as well, because the Greens have struck a deal with the government. So Labor is as irresponsible on this as the government is on trying to take people's rights away with poor process and playing politics with that as well. So we have the two major parties here exposed on different issues, I think, as being highly irresponsible this week. And the Greens emerge in this pension deal as this is a fundamental change for the Greens. They've gone from being the party of, angry opposition to just about everything now to the swing factor in the Senate, judiciously looking at policy and allowing good policy to pass. So this is a transformation of the Greens under the new leader, Richard Di Natale.
Okay. Peter Hartcher, thanks for your time
Pleasure.
today.